Beautiful. Tom, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, good to be here again, Guy. What's it been, about a
I,
year?
at least, maybe even
Yeah,
more, maybe 18
yeah.
months, maybe even 2 years. It all seems to be a blur at the moment.
Yeah.
Just on a side note, I've been following you. I think I discovered your work, Tom, in 2015. So it's probably close to 7 years. I've been kind of in and out in the background, and we've done a couple of interviews on the podcast. And honestly, it's been amazing to watch, and I have no doubt you have been putting content up for a lot longer than that. And it's just been amazing to watch the evolution of the work that you're doing and how you're reaching people and how it's getting out there more and more and more. And I certainly want to play my part today in continuing to spread the incredible work that you do, Tom. And I'm always curious, what drives you? What is the passion behind that? Because it's a mighty effort, and you could be at a place in life where you want to just kick back and have a margarita, but that's certainly not the case at all.
No, I would like to actually kick back and spend more time with my wife. I'm retired, she's retired, and we always had this idea that when we were retired, we just could do what we wanted. We would be together, and it would be very relaxed. But it's not like that at all. It's very busy for both of us. We're both just almost as busy as we were when we were, getting, paychecks, and we're not retired. So yes, I would like more time. But what drives me and why I do this just is because I think it's useful, it's helpful, and it's helpful in many ways. It's helpful to people in general. I guess that's the main thing. To help them understand who they are. To help them deal with issues and problems and things they have in their life. Most people's lives are full of anxiety and often emotional pain and problems, and my work has a way to understand that within a bigger picture and see what the cause is, and therefore, if you understand why it's like that, then you can change it, because mostly it's like that because of the things you do, because of your ego, because of your beliefs. Those are the things that make life not fun and full of joy. So that's one thing I just think is helpful, and being helpful is most important thing. And the other thing is, it introduces a whole new paradigm to science and all of science. Not just physics. I'm a physicist, but not just physics. It's all of science has been stuck for a couple of centuries now on basically Newton's clockwork universe idea of materialism. And even in quantum physics, where they have done many experiments to show that that's not really so, they're still stuck there because they don't know what else to do. They see that reality seems to be information based, not mass based or particle based. It's not really about stuff, but they don't know what to do with that. They don't know how to take the next step forward to turn that into a science. It's just like, yeah, well, okay, we know that, but now what?
Yeah.
So they're just kind of stuck there, which leaves them still, clinging to materialism, and just not being able to explain their science very well. And that's important because materialism as a philosophy has a lot of things about it that aren't really helpful. The idea that there is no point for being here. Everything is random. It just is. There's no purpose. There's nothing you really need to be or not be. It's all kind of a random event, and here we are interacting, and it really means nothing. And that's not very uplifting. That's not very, it's not a joyful idea, and it kind of makes people less, I don't know, less caring. It makes people see themselves more self in a more self-centered light. It's just me in this random world, and I'm here to fight my way to the top and do the best I can with what I've got and make sure that I've got the things I need. And it kind of creates a self-centered viewpoint of you versus the world. And that's not very helpful either. A lot of our greed and dysfunction comes out of that sort of an attitude. So it's just not really it's not good science, and it's not really good philosophy either. So the my big toe that I bring will replace that materialism with another completely different idea of how the world works and how reality works, and where we do have a purpose, and where what we do and how we do it and why we do it is very important. So anyway, so it's just being useful. I see that the world is struggling with anxiety and with fear, and there's really no need. We do that to ourselves. So that's what drives me, is to be helpful.
No, there's so many things there, Tom, that you share that resonate so much. It's interesting, on my journey. When I started reaching into my 30s, I started becoming aware of this work, if you like, of this understanding of who I am, where I think for the first part of my life, it didn't even occur to me. And as I started exploring myself and what it actually means to be human, the trade-off has definitely been more peace within myself, and not looking externally, but also much more compassion for fellow humans that you speak of, and actually caring, and because you start to understand that there's so much more than just the physical. And I guess my question to you is, with everything that you're doing, are you seeing a shift over your time with people? Do you think more and more people are starting to become aware of this work? And are you hopeful for the future?
Well, yes to both of those. I do see changes, and I am very hopeful. I'm an optimist just by nature. Everything is good, and life is good, and so I'm optimistic. But also, being a realist, I can see that there's a lot of change going on in the world. I mean, look at the response that we have to the Ukrainian crisis or Ukrainian war that's going on now. If you go back, Guy, just 200 years, you would find Western Europe in the middle of an expansionist view, and they were colonizing the rest of the world, right? And they were competing with each other, who could grab the best colonies. And what they do is they take their war machine and they bring their ships up on the coast, basically take over, because they had superior military might, and then they would claim all of the natural resources as their own and get the indigenous people who lived there to be their cheap labor. And that was all, that was in Europe, was a great idea. It was a good thing to do. It was, what we should do. Bringing civilization to the heathens, it was, it was that kind of an attitude. So that attitude falls into, what I call like warlord mentality. If you're big and strong, then you can take over what's not big and strong. It's yours for the picking, and there's no moral or ethical issue with it. So there we were just 200 years ago, and that was the prevailing ethic, say in Western Europe. And because those were the powers in Western Europe that had the ability to go out, and take over other people. Anyway, here we are 200 years later, and we see that the Russians running into a sovereign nation, the Ukraine, and everybody's going, how awful, how terrible. That's not nice. That's immoral, unethical. It's just wrong. And the world's is pretty well united on that attitude that it's just wrong. So to me, that's a lot of growth in just 200 years. We've gone from the warlord mentality that humans used, that warlord idea is what humans use basically for their social organization, right? As cities came together, whatever, there was the one strong person who was the leader and made up all the rules. And we've had that now for almost 200,000 years, which is just about the whole time that Homo sapiens been on this planet. And just, in the last 150 years, we've seen that change, this warlord mentality. So that's good. And as far as the way we treat each other, we are much kinder and gentler now than, in general, than we were 100 years ago. If you go back 100 or 200 years ago, and you'll see life was really cheap. There were the powerful and there were the weak. And the weak really didn't have much to say about anything. They could basically be run over, and you could do anything you wanted. Back in that day, 200 years ago or so, we had in the United States, we had what we called the robber barons, which were basically the very wealthy, building a railroad from the East Coast to the West Coast, and they didn't have enough labor to do that. And that's where the term being shanghaied came from, because they would send boats over to Asia and basically get people, tell them lies about, oh, we have a great job for you, or just put a sack over their head and throw them in a boat. And now that's called being shanghaied. And they'd end up in California, in the West Coast, and then they would be used to work on a railroad. And that was seen as a clever way to get labor. Today we'd look at that and say, how awful. You just can't grab people off the street and take them someplace to have them, for cheap labor. That's not right. But at the time, there was no big outcry about, oh, that's awful. We can't do that. It was okay. So you see, if you really look back in time, just a few hundred years, you'll see we've grown up a lot as a species. Humanity has changed quite a bit. And the one thing about growing up is that the more you grow up, the easier it is to grow up more. It accelerates. So you start out, let's see, where's my hand? You start out with a curve. I'll start over here, and end of my finger will be the curve, and it'll go very, very slowly up, and then it gets real fast. That curve shoots up. And I think we're right now on that knee of that curve where it begins to turn the corner and start to shoot up faster. So that makes me very positive about the future. We have now, for the first time, all the various pieces we need to take a big step forward. We've been taking small steps forward. We take a really big step forward in quality of consciousness, in growing up and getting rid of fear. And that last big piece of that step was the internet. That's another difference between the early 1800s, where Europeans were making colonies all over the world, and the people back home, that was all that violence was taking place, in another, some other place that they didn't have to see. They didn't really have to hear much about it. They just heard about the great successes that we had, taking over other countries and getting their resources and subduing their people. But they didn't actually see the price of that. They didn't see the people being subdued. So it was easy just to not think about it, not accept it, not really deal with it. But that's not true now. Now we see up close and personal on the internet everything that goes on almost all over the world. There's very few places in the world that we don't have a vision into what's happening there. So that also helps us grow up. So the internet has allowed us to make humanity a family again, or a small tribe, rather than this spread out bunch of people that really don't communicate with each other very much.
Yeah.
When you have a family or a tribe, generally it's much easier to have people be nice to each other. It's small. Everybody kind of knows each other pretty well and goes out of their way to be nice because these are people you have to live with. Well, when we have that attitude about all of humanity, we'll all try to be a little nicer, and we'll see all these people are people we have to live with. People that are just trying to get by and have a good life just like we are, and it's easier to have compassion. So yes, I think that we're on the knee of that curve, and we're going to see our growth, our quality of consciousness, the way we treat each other to get better and more productive. And I think it's accelerating. So over the next 2 or 3 decades, I think we'll have even more progress.
Yeah.
And in science, that's kind of the soft end of the my big toe. But on the science end, I see that happening as well. If they get this new paradigm I'm talking about together, then that will solve a lot of the outstanding paradoxes and mysteries of science. That will take us, a leap forward in understanding the nature of our reality, and that will be good for everyone as well. So yes, I see positive things. Now that doesn't mean that something horrible couldn't happen. There is free will. We can do things that go backwards. This thing with Russia and the Ukraine could turn into a nuclear exchange among major powers and set us all back, a millennia. But hopefully that won't happen. But free will says, we can always make really bad choices. But I think the potential for making good choices right now is probably greater.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that you've mentioned many times there, and I think it'd be nice to explore a little bit deeper around your work as well, because you talk about growth many times as a species, as humans, as an individual, and also about removing or letting go of fear and stepping into love more. And to me, I always, when I think about those things, because I think about it that we are all part of something much larger anyway. We are all connected, but in the Newtonian way, it's all, like you say, separate, physical, and everything's mechanistic and mechanical, and it just works like a clock kind of attitude. Do you? I guess the question I'm asking is that ultimately why we are here, why we have experiences, and why we have challenges, is for that growth and to let go or move through fear?
Absolutely. That is our whole purpose.
Wow.
To be here. That's this virtual reality that we call the physical universe is a reality that was created just so that we, pieces of consciousness, could have more useful choices that would help us grow, more meaningful choices with consequences. Before, consciousness just sat around and communicated with each other. That's what consciousness does. It transmits, it receives, it communicates. That's, it's aware. We were aware of each other and aware of our environment. And there's not a lot of growth in that. There's a little growth in that, but it's not much. As far as growing, you need to make significant choices, and not just who am I going to talk to next and what am I going to say, but real significant choices. So this virtual reality was created as what I call an entropy reduction virtual reality. It's like a flight simulator. It's an entropy reduction simulator, if you will, for us, pieces of consciousness, to make choices in. And by those choices, we evolve. And evolution means that we lower entropy, but what that really boils down to, it's a long kind of logical process, but what that boils down to is caring about other people, not being so self-centered. So it's kind of the opposite of where materialism takes you. Instead of the clockwork universe where everything is separate and nothing really matters, there's no particular purpose involved. There is a purpose, and that's to evolve. evolve the quality of your consciousness, lower the entropy of your consciousness, or become love, become more caring, make it about other, not just about self. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And why? Because consciousness is an information system, and information systems evolve by creating information, which is lowering their entropy. So it's just the nature of our system. It's not that the system decided that would be a good idea, but it's just the fundamental nature of our system. It is a system that is evolving. It can de-evolve. It can evolve. If it de-evolves too far, then there's no information. Everything's random. So order is lower entropy. Things that matter, things that have an ability to make changes, an ability to do work is what they say in physics, but it's it's ability to make a difference. You have that through order, not through randomness. So the system, just a natural system, can evolve and lower its entropy, or it can de-evolve and basically die if it de-evolves too far. So it's just evolving, and we are pieces of that system. We're pieces of consciousness of that system. So this larger conscious system is an information system. We're a piece of it. We're all together, and the way we learn best is by being in this virtual reality and interacting with each other. It's about our relationships with each other, how we treat each other.
So are we then, as, and I use your terminology, an individual piece of the larger consciousness system? So does that mean our human experience and the choices we are making are directly giving information or passing and receiving information to the larger consciousness system to allow that to then evolve and for that growth? So we become part of that.
Well, yeah, that's pretty much the way it is, but a little different. And that is, it's not so much we're passing the information up, is that we're a piece of the system. We're just a piece of that larger system. If you're in computer terms, that would be we're a virtual machine inside a larger machine. Okay, what that means is that you have in computer terms, let's say back in, I don't know if it's still this case, but a long time back, the Macs all had a virtual PC inside the Mac because there was a lot more PC software than there was Mac software. So the Mac system also created a virtual PC. And if you went into that mode, then it would work just like a PC and you could run PC software.
Right.
If you were out of that mode, it would run Mac software. So they could run either of those, whereas PCs just ran PC software, you see? So that's what it means by a virtual machine. It's a computer within a computer. So a big computer can partition off parts of its memory, parts of its processing, parts of its, of its operating system, whatever. It can partition off parts, and then that acts like a little computer inside another computer. So instead of computer, let's just say information system, because consciousness is an information system. So we are just a subset of this larger consciousness system. We are really all one. That's a true thing. When you hear people say, we're all one, that's really true. We're all just a piece of this larger system. And because we have free will as pieces of consciousness, we can make choices, free will choices, and by those choices, we lower our entropy. And it's just because we're a piece of that system that as we lower our entropy, the whole system's entropy is lowered because we're a piece of it. So as the piece parts lower their entropy, the whole system's entropy goes down with it. So that's kind of how that works. So yes, we make choices. If they're good choices, that means they're low entropy choices. That means they're caring choices, ethical choices, moral choices. And if we do that, then the whole system prospers and grows and evolves. So this larger consciousness system is not a supernatural system. It's just a natural system. It's just trying to stay alive like all other systems within its environment. It does that by lowering its entropy, and we're pieces
Right.
of it. So that's kind of the bigger picture of what we're here for. So that's our purpose. Our purpose is to lower our entropy. And like I say, that logically can be shown to be in a social system, which a bunch of individuated pieces of consciousness create a social system. And in a social system, the way you lower entropy is by cooperation and caring and helping each other. That lowers entropy within a social system. So that's consciousness is a social system and of individuals that are all part of the larger system. And we're here for just that reason. And our world, our earth, this virtual reality we call the physical universe, that's here just to give us more interesting and more growth inducing choices.
Is that why we, when we're born and when we're here, we have to discover this for ourselves? As opposed to,
Yes.
wouldn't it be nice if, or like I think sometimes, God, what happens if I turned up and already knew half of this stuff? My life would be so much easier, you know?
Yeah, why don't we come with a user's manual, right?
Exactly,
That has
yeah.
all this in it. But the reason for that is the way we evolve is by the choices we make. And we have to make those choices at the fundamental place that we are. In other words, it has to be an authentic choice of ours that we make because we've grown to that level of being able to make that choice. And if you had the knowledge of how the system worked, then your intellect would get in and would start gaming the system. Oh, I know I should act like this. So, okay, I'll act that way. But the problem is, acting and behaving really isn't what it's about. It's about being. It's not about acting kind. It's about being kind. And there's a real big difference between those two. The person who's acting kind may be easier to be around, but they're not lowering their entropy much. They're acting. It doesn't really change who they are. And when they get into a different situation where maybe nobody's watching or where they're really pressed very hard, then all that ugliness is still in there. You see, they haven't grown up. They've just behaving better. So if we knew about, why we're here and what we're doing, we would tend to game the system by intellectually trying to be that and then feeling like we're very successful because our behavior kind of mirrors the way we're supposed to be, and that won't help. That doesn't help us grow up. That would just be another trap where we would be nicer to each other, and I guess that would be polite, but we wouldn't really evolve much. We wouldn't change very much. You really have to change at the being level, not at the intellectual level. It's not about acting, it's about being. So that's much better if every time you start without any memory of why you're here or what's going on or what you did before, and you just start making choices which reflect the real you inside. Those things you do are just an expression of you and who you are. And some people still try to act their way through life by being who they think they should be, but usually that's very high stress. That's very by the time you've done that for enough years, you get kind of neurotic going down that path because you can't ever really be yourself. You're always being who you think you should be, and you probably always feel that you're never quite there. It's not a good route. It's not a good path to take. That's a path of stress and eventually a path of probably anger at yourself for not being good enough and other kinds of things. So we don't want to do that. We just want to be authentic, just be ourselves, who we are. And then we want to look at that and say, is that good? Is that low entropy or not? And if it's not, then we need to change it. We need to change who we are. And that's not easy. Changing who you are takes some effort. It takes some real strong focus to do that. But that's how we grow, is by changing how we are. And that's why I gave this historical example in the beginning. We as a species have changed. we're not the same people that we were in the early 1800s. We don't have those same attitudes. We don't make those same choices. And it's not that we're pretending to be better. We really are better. We've really grown up a lot.
So it's clearly not then, because the amount of times we often try to think our way through life and think of the problems and feed the intellect. I've certainly been guilty of this. It's like, can I read one more book? Should I listen to one more podcast? Should I do one more course? And you like constantly feeding the mind. But and for me, I always think about the mind or the heart and coming back to a place of being. So would that be fair to say then, if we truly want to grow up, there must be an element of surrender to this then, to allow ourselves to present our best self moving forward?
Well, an element of surrender can be a path. There's really three paths toward growing up, and one of them is the path of surrender, where you just say, "Oh, there is something bigger than me here. It's not just me." Okay, that's kind of the materialist viewpoint. It's all a big machine. I'm in the machine, and it's really me against the world. And that's not profitable. But the surrender says, "Oh, there's something bigger than me. There's something that is beyond just me. There's something about morality and ethics that is not just about individual behavior. It's about who you are. It's about the quality of you as a human being." And that can be done by surrendering to these higher ideals or higher principles, and just kind of live in the moment and be yourself, observe the results of your choices and the consequences of your choices, and then try to do better from that. And that's a good way to grow up. There's another path that's called the path of good deeds. And that's where you try to be as helpful as possible to everybody. You give. But again, you can do that intellectually. Oh, I should be helpful, therefore I will. That's acting kind. But there's a difference between that and being kind. So you really have to be it, not just act it. And the last one is called the warrior's path, and that is where you kind of find your fears and get rid of them. You just work on it. You put effort into it, which you use your intellect to do that. But your intellect there is just a partner. It's not like you need to let your intellect go. Your intellect is good. We need an intellect. That's what enables us to go home and live in a nice house with heat in the winter and cool in the summer. That intellect has done a lot of wonderful things for us. So it's not that you don't need it. It's just you can't run your entire life that way. It's not about just acting. It's about being. You also have another part of you that is who you really are, not just the way you act or the way you behave. It's deeper than your behavior. It's who you are at the core. And I call that the being level. It's who you be. Poor English, but it makes the point. That's what you have to grow up. That's where the growth is. That's where the quality is. So it wasn't that those people back in the time of colonialism were, it's not that they were awful people. They just hadn't grown to the point that they thought that taking other people's stuff, was a bad idea. They just didn't see it that way. We're big, we're strong, we're advanced, we're superior, and we'll just come take you over. And then, no, we'll build you a railroad, and we'll make schools, and we'll teach you to be like us. Well, that's hugely arrogant. So that was the attitude. And who they hurt and how many people they killed in the process, well, wasn't all that important. That was just part of the price to pay. So, they... that's how they were. That was them at the core.
Got it.
That wasn't just their intellect. That was the way those people were. So now we're different, and I'm glad of that. I see that as a real positive thing. I saw it with COVID too. When the COVID came around, there was there was a lot of interest in caring about other people. Oh, there are people who are very vulnerable to this, mostly people who are older or people who have, asthma, have trouble breathing to begin with, or people that have other immune deficiency disorders and that sort of things. And these people, if they get it, they'll probably kill them because they're very high risk. And in order not to do that, in order not to infect other people, then a lot of people made choices that weren't necessarily best thing for them, but it was best for the whole. So they did it. They kept their distance. They wore their masks. They were careful about, where they socialized and how they did it. And because so many people voluntarily chose to constrain their lives in that way, basically hundreds of thousands of people now are still alive that otherwise would have been dead. We've saved hundreds of thousands of lives in doing that. And all of those lives are important. So that's another, us as grown up. Whereas before, if you look at that, another as deadly, if not more deadly, flu was it's called Spanish flu. I think it came around in the late early 1900s, like 1915 to 1920, sometime in there, and it killed lots of people. But the mask wearing and the distancing, they tried that a little bit, but nobody really took it too seriously. It's life, people get diseases, people die, and that's the way it is. So mostly people just kept on keeping on, and it killed whoever it killed and didn't whoever it didn't, and people went on. They didn't have this sense of, if we act differently, we can save a lot of people's lives. So I see that we are evolving, and that's good news, because the more we evolve, the easier it'll be to take the next step and the next step. It's that first step that's really the toughest. And
yeah,
we're
it's
getting
interesting
there.
you say all that, because I live here in northern New South Wales in Australia, and we've just experienced the worst floods ever recorded here. Literally just suburbs across, and it devastated a whole town as well. And the one thing that came out of it instantly were the way the locals responded to each other. It was actually unbelievable, Tom, to witness the good of humanity come together in such a way where you just had people turning up. So many, they didn't know what to do eventually, because it's like, what can we do? How can we help? How can we serve others? And it was just honestly absolutely beautiful to witness here. From that was the one positive thing. The question then, logical last question I want to ask you along this theme, because we've kind of discussed the larger reality system, and then coming here with our user's manual and contributing to the growth of ourselves, or part of the system. Then as we begin to grow up and take on a way of being that's cooperative, kind, and loving, and eroding fear, what happens then when we die? What happens with that information from that point? Because obviously death is clearly a very big fear for most people as well, and it's certainly something we all have to overcome when that happens, at whatever time. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that last sort of progression piece.
Okay, well, the good news is that we, consciousness, don't die. It's the body that dies. It's the avatar that dies. So what do you do when you're playing The Sims and your Sims character dies? Or, I don't know, Sim characters die very often, but let's say World of Warcraft, now that's a game where everybody fights. So when your character dies, which it happens a whole lot that your character dies, what do you do? Well, it's not a problem for the consciousness playing the game. The consciousness, who's the player, doesn't die. They have to go get another character, or they resuscitate the character they've got in some manner, depends on how the game is made. So you go get another character and you keep on playing the game. And why do you do that? Well, because the games to be interesting are complex enough that it really takes you, I don't know, probably 100 lives before you actually really get good at playing the game. You're kind of lost in it and don't know what you're doing. And it takes that long. If you just played the game until you died once and it's, you out of the game, sorry, can't get back anymore.
Yeah, wow.
That's the end of it. Well, that game would never go anywhere, right? That game would never sell. Nobody'd ever play it because it wouldn't work. Anything that's complex, anything that's significant, not just trivially simple, takes a while for people to learn and to grow and to get there. So you need to try again and again and again, and eventually you begin to evolve and grow up. Your skill level evolves. So you start at a level 1 and you go up to a level, I don't know, 30 or 40 or whatever the top levels are. And that takes experience to gain the knowledge that you have to gain to be able to do those things. And you get more and more powerful, I think, as you level up. And our game works the same way here. Okay, so we have a lifetime. We, consciousness, we play all the choices of the avatar. The consciousness makes the choices. The avatar is just a computed picture to help us visualize what's going on. So we are consciousness. We get a data stream, just like your computer gets a data stream to show World of Warcraft. The elves and the monsters and the barbarians and all the things that run around in that game. And that data stream, then the player interprets. That data is displayed as pixels on a screen, and the player looks at all those pixels, and all they are is a million little dots of light. That's all it is. That's the data. And the user, the player, looks at that million pixels of dots of light and says, oh, rivers, streams, elves, monsters, weapons, magic, and they see all that stuff, and it makes sense to them. Well, we're like that. We get a data stream, and we interpret that data stream to be this reality, this virtual reality. So we're consciousness. The avatar doesn't really exist. It's just a computed thing. Just like the avatar in World of Warcraft doesn't really exist as an independent being. It's just there for the player to look at so that he can see what's going on. It gives him a way of understanding what's happening in the game. So the avatar dies. The consciousness, the player doesn't die, just the avatar. The player goes on and gets another avatar, just like you do in the video games. Gets another avatar and tries again. And the name of the game is to evolve the quality of your consciousness, to make good choices, to learn how to not be so self-centered, to learn to care about other people, to be more about, what can I give rather than what can I get? What can I take? It's the opposite of that. It's what can I give and how can I help? So that's what we're here to learn. So when that avatar dies, that avatar, the consciousness that was playing that avatar, immediately begins to forget that past life. And I mean, it's just the way you immediately begin to fit a dream. When you have a dream and you wake up, instantly, as soon as you wake up, that dream's really clear. 2 or 3 minutes later, it's kind of fuzzy. 2 or 3 hours later, you only have the big parts of it. And a day later, you don't really remember exactly what that dream was about anymore. It just kind of fades out like that. That's the way it is when your avatar dies. That consciousness, then, instead of seeing himself as the avatar, that past experience just begins to fade out. And he finds himself aware in some other virtual reality, not this virtual reality, but a different one I call the transition reality. And he's aware in this transition reality, which is basically just a place where he can let go and decide what to do next. Start over, get another avatar, get into the process of getting another avatar. So the way it works more technically is that you, as a consciousness, are what I call an individuated unit of consciousness, an IUOC. And a piece of that individuated consciousness is partitioned off to something I call a free will awareness unit. And that free will awareness unit is what is actually logged on to that avatar is getting the data stream that describes that virtual reality that we call the physical universe. Okay. Now, that part, that free will awareness unit, when it attaches itself, or when it gets that data stream, I should say, when it gets that data stream for that avatar, it doesn't have any memory of the last life or the one before that. All it has is the quality of consciousness that it's earned up to that point. So it's been evolving all these various lifetimes, and it's grown up. It's making better and better choices. It's lowering its entropy, a higher quality of consciousness. So you always start with that quality of consciousness, but you don't start with the user manual like you were talking about. You don't start with an intellect full of information. That would just be a burden. That would get in the way. It's too much information for one to process. What would you do with 10,000 wives, 40,000 children, that sort of thing. It's not useful to do that. And besides that, like I said, you don't want the intellect that would then game the system and try to act rather than be. So when that free will awareness unit gets that data stream and says, okay, now I'm an infant, or maybe I'm still in utero, I can see lights and feel things. I've got a little awareness here. So when that free will awareness unit attaches, it thinks it is that thing because it doesn't have any past history. So as far as it knows, that's what it is. It is the avatar because all of its experience is only the avatar's experience. Whether it's the experience of being in the womb, or the experience of being born, or the experience of being a baby, or a 6-year-old, or a 10-year-old, an adult, all of that experience that's that free will awareness unit. That's the only experience it's ever had. Okay, so it identifies completely as I am that avatar. So you see, we need that. If you had a user's manual, it would kind of get in the way of that real firm identification with the avatar, and then you wouldn't be as authentic in your choices. So anyway, the free will awareness unit becomes aware, oh, I'm not in the old reality anymore. I just died. All right, where am I? Well, transition reality. Relax, take it easy. Everything's okay. When you're ready, we'll get you another avatar, sort of thing goes on then. And that partition that free will awareness unit off from the individuated unit of consciousness, that partition comes down. So now that free will awareness unit doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. Now you just have the individuated unit of consciousness. And when the individuated unit of consciousness is ready to have another lifetime, it partitions another part of itself at the newer level of quality that it's gained from that last lifetime. And that partitioned free will awareness unit logs on to another data stream. See, and so that's how the process goes. Now, I've left a lot of details out, but I've given you the basic idea.
Amazing.
So that's how that goes around and around. So we're immortal. We don't die. We just keep on growing, evolving, trying to do better. And that's, and we're in this virtual reality because our choices here help us grow, because we have lots of moral, ethical, meaningful, life and death, significant choices here. So that's really what's going on. That's the nature of our reality, is that we are in a virtual reality, and consciousness is the computer. Consciousness is the system that's created the reality, and it didn't program the reality like World of Warcraft is programmed. It let that reality evolve. It started with the initial conditions and a rule set, push the run button, and just let those initial conditions change according to the rules. And that rule set was the ball of plasma that's really small volume, high pressure, high temperature, big bang kind of thing, except it's the big digital bang. And you push the run button, and it starts computing what would happen according to the rule set. starting with those initial conditions of the ball of plasma, and we end up with this universe. So our universe is not programmed. It just evolved
Yeah.
from a rule
Wow.
set.
That's amazing, Tom. It's there's a lot to take in there, and especially if people are hearing this for the first time. But I'm pretty sure most people listening to this podcast are already very open to a lot of this kind of conversation and work, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And I just want to touch on a couple of things before we wrap up. I'm aware of the time from my end, Tom, but the next logical question would be how how do we explore, because you've got exploring consciousness and the larger reality. I believe you've got a course, and because one thing when you were sharing all that, I think it for many people, we can be skeptical, which I've heard you say is healthy to be skeptical, but keep your mind open. And would you be able to touch on that? And you've also created Tom's Park as well, which I'm intrigued about. And I'm assuming both are designed to help you start to have a deeper understanding with this work.
They are, exactly. I'm one of the I'm very few, if not the only person at the end of my talks. I tell everybody not to believe a word I just said. So don't believe a word I've told you, because it's not useful to believe it. You have to experience it. It's not, it's just not all that helpful to believe something or to disbelieve something. You have to experience it. If it's not your experience, it's not your truth. It's somebody else's truth. You have to have experience. So when I tell people that, then they ask me, they say, well, if I'm going to experience this larger consciousness system and have my own personal experience, how do I do that? So I figured that was fair. If I tell them to go experience it on their own, I guess I should try to help them do that. So I put together a course where I teach people to get around and experience the larger consciousness system so that they can do all the things that consciousness can do. So basically, that is, I teach them to, when they want to and how they want to, experience paranormal things. They can do out of body, explore consciousness from the inside. One consciousness can go out and explore the larger consciousness system. They can remote view, get information. They can get information out of the databases. They could see ours. All those things that we think of as paranormal are just normal to the intuitive side of consciousness, but they're only on the intuitive side. Okay, they do not happen on the intellectual side. Your connection to consciousness is through the intuitive side. So in our culture, we tend to really develop that intellectual side a lot. We go to school, read books, go to college, go to graduate school. We work and work and work to develop that intellectual side, but we don't do anything much to develop that intuitive side. And exploring the larger reality has to all be on the intuitive side, at the being level, not at the intellectual level. All right, so I have to teach people how to do that. And I have this course, and this course is now available, do-it-yourself course. It just came out recently. I used to give it. We'd go someplace, we'd rent a hotel someplace really nice, and we'd have, 100 people or so, and I'd run them through exercises, and then we talk about it, and I'd run them through exercises. And I made videos of all of those. And we went through all of those videos and captured all the best questions and all the best answers and all the best ways of helping people and put them together into this one course. So this course has me talking, and it has, other people asking questions. You don't get to ask the question yourself because you buy it as a package. But the questions have been taken over, 30 or 40 different classes where they pick out the best questions. So the questions are very likely going to be your questions too. The same questions that you would have if you took the course. So that's one product that you can get, and the whole course is there. And there's a set of binaural beats to help people who aren't very good at meditating to get into a meditation state so they can get more out of it, so they can work on that intuitive side and develop their intuitive side. And when you develop your intuitive side, it's not only good for doing consciousness things, but it's also good for being creative, for coming up with better ideas. If you're a creative person, like a writer or a painter or somebody who creates, or even an engineer who creates new things, new devices, or a scientist who creates new experiments and new ways of understanding things. There's creativity everywhere. And if you live your life in a way that being creative, appreciation of art, appreciation of architecture, appreciation of music, all of that, you can only appreciate it if you also are creative. If you're not creative at all, then you really don't appreciate those things. They're just there. And you may learn, oh, that's nice, or that's not so nice, and I like this, but I don't like that. But in order to appreciate creative art, you have to have a creative side yourself to really experience the feeling and what's going on, what the artist is trying to do. So you're better at business, you're better at relationship, you're better at everything if you have a well-developed intuitive side, and you can explore a larger conscious system. You can learn how to remote view, use your mind to heal. You can heal other people. And I'll teach in that course how that works, why it works, what are the principles involved, not just how to do it, but what's the science of it, what's the structure of it. So that's what this course is, and it takes a person probably 3 or 4 or 5 days to do it if they just keep doing it. But since it's a do it on your own time, you could do it over a month or 2 months if you wanted. And you can do it as many times as you want. It's an audio book product. It's all done in audio. So the only thing you'll miss from being at that course that may have cost $2,000 to go to the course, because we have a venue to pay for and meals and all the rest of that, you get to do it at home. And I don't think it costs very much. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it doesn't cost very much. And that, for what it gives you. And then the other thing, Tom's Park, that is a book that I've written, but it's not just a book like to read, read a story or get some information. It is a training course, really, for people who had trouble in the first course, who had trouble keeping their intellect out of their intuitive business. When you're doing things with your intuitive side, your intellect crashes and then the whole thing disappears, because those are two different ways of processing. And if the intellectual way of processing gets into an intuitive thing, it just crashes it. You can't force the intuition. You have to let that happen. You don't intellectually, logically get information. Information just comes to you. It's beyond logic on the intuitive side. So the logical side gets in and it crashes it. And people who live their whole life out of their heads, out of their intellects, sometimes have a really hard time letting that intellect go so that they can go out of body and heal with their mind and, get information about whatever they want. So because I had given those courses many, many, many times, and there was a group of people who just never really seemed to get very far because of that dominant intellect, I created Tom's Park, which is a way for those people to develop their intuitive side. It's a way that starts with your imagination. You begin imagining things, and I create a park and lots of things to imagine there. Lots of things in the park. And the book just kind of describes how it works, what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do, and then describes the part. And with the idea is, and the way I've set it up is that you get into an imaginative story like a daydream. So it's like daydreaming. And the story eventually gets interesting enough that it begins to take on a life of itself. And most people who have if you've daydreamed very much, that typically is what happens. You start to daydream and it's all intellectual. If you're talking to somebody, you're playing both parts. But eventually, as you get into it, you kind of forget about creating it, and it starts to just go on its own. Things just happen, and you're interacting with them. So you get to a transition where the daydream turns into an out of body, because the larger consciousness system is working with me with this, and it will give you a data stream that plays perfectly with your daydream, connects right to it. Exactly what you're doing, it matches the storyline perfectly. So you can start with a daydream and end up in an out of body. And that just, the whole process relaxes your intellect to the point that it can let go and let the intuition do its thing. Now, it's not something you do once and bingo, you're done. It's something that you work at. It's an iterative process. So you may have to do it 20, 30, 50, 100 times before you get to the point that you can just go there and, you can go right into the intuitive side and use your intent to do whatever you want, whether you want to heal or travel or remote view or whatever. So it'll take a while to do that, but it's a way that you can learn to do it. And really all you need to do is be able to imagine just even a little bit, because the more you can imagine and the more complex that imagination gets. Like, you not only imagine what you see and what you hear, but what you smell and what you taste and what you feel. Imagine in all your senses, all five senses. Well, that gets your mind so busy that it doesn't really have much room for that intellect to butt in. So you need to really get something that's interesting, that you connect to, that resonates with you, not just counting sheep jumping over a fence. It has to be something that you connect with and have some experience with. And then eventually, even if you're very hard intellectual, eventually, and on your 20th or 30th time, you will have done it so often that it becomes so easy that you tend to relax with it. And as you relax with it, you let go. And as you let go, your imagination just turned into an out of body. And I have lots of things in this part that helps you heal yourself and others, helps you deal with fear. I've got things in there that will help you do all the paranormal things, the out of body, the getting data, whatever. So there's tools in there to use to do that. So it's just a fun place, and it's not just you that are there, but it's a park. There's people there. It's got a lot of staff, and you'll meet other people that may just happen to be in the park at that time. And I suspect that most people will make pretty good friends with people there. You'll see these people over and over again. You'll get to know them. You'll have a relationship with them. So there's a lot of learning, even in personal relationship, that you can get in this park. So it's not just about imagining situations and stuff. It's also interactive with people. So you go there and there's restaurants there, there's a lake there, there's a beach, there's woods, there's mountains, there's hiking trails, there's horses and that you can ride. There's lots of animals and different things. And the whole thing is put together in a way that it is always positive, always safe. There's nothing in Tom's Park that will ever harm you. And if there's anything negative there, it's because you bring it in yourself. You bring it with you. That's the only way negativity can get there. So that's Tom's Park. It's a tool to help people, particularly Westerners like us. I'm a physicist, and I'm not sure what you do for a living, Guy, but most of us use our intellects a lot in our jobs. That's what we do, and we're so used to using that intellect as a tool that it becomes very difficult for us to let go of it, which is why people have a hard time learning to go out of body, learning to use their mind to heal others. It's that intellect keeps wanting to jump in and organize and run things and judge and analyze and do all that stuff we normally do. And as soon as that intellect jumps in there, well, the whole process is gone. You can't do paranormal things from the intellect. They only can be done in the intuitive space. And the point is eventually to get that intuition so well developed that your intuitive side becomes just as accurate, just as repeatable, just as reliable as your intellectual side. And actually, if you work at it long enough, it'll get better. Your intuition will actually get better, more reliable, and more accurate than your intellect, because your intellect never really has enough data to be truly logical. But the intuitive side has all the data, that's available. It has much more data than your intellect has. So eventually your intuitive side actually gets a lot smarter than your intellectual side. Right now, it's the other. Most people, their intellect side is smart, their intuitive side is kind of goofy. It sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. You can't really believe it, kind of thing, but you can develop it to where it's very accurate and very reliable.
Fantastic, Tom.
It just takes
That's
time.
fantastic. I'll make sure the links are in the show notes for both of those, so people, if they're watching a YouTube video, listening to it on iTunes or on my blog, they can just literally pause, and the links will be below to go and check out those amazing courses in Tom's Park, which I will do as well, Tom, and I'll keep you posted on how I go. It's phenomenal what you and your team have been doing to bring this forward for people, and I'm just happy to be able to share it with everyone today, Tom. I just want to
The one other thing, Guy, I tell your audience is that almost every course I've ever given, like a lecture or whatever, is on YouTube for free. They're all free. Now, the Tom's Park and this course, they're both things you have to buy, but there's tons and tons of free things out there. Actually, more than 1,000 hours worth of videos, that are out there. But there's a search tool now that you can search by subject if you want, and you can get that at my website. So lots of places you can go. Actually, the books are for free too. Amazing. On Google Books. You can look them up. I put them there to be free for everyone.
TomCampbell.com, would that be?
No, it's www.my-big-toe.com.
Yeah, we'll link to that as well.
My Big Toe with hyphens.com. And if you want to know where I might be doing an event or giving something, giving a course or something, you can get that at www.mbtevents.com. That's Keith and Donna, and they're kind of my event managers. So you can buy binaural beats there and at my at my website and whatever. So anyway, that's how you can get in touch with us, and we have lots of free.
Tom, I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for that, your wisdom as always. Every time I speak to you, Tom, I'm always captivated, and learn something. So I'm just grateful that for everything that you do, coming on here, sharing it, being able to share it with others here in Australia. It's certainly appreciated here. So thank you, Tom.
Well, you're welcome, Guy, and I appreciate you inviting me. You give me another audience to speak to.